Nice.
Good morning, Sol.
Good morning. Jesus.
Yeah, it's good to have you here on the podcast. Yeah,
How you feeling?
I'm feeling nervous.
Yeah.
Feeling nervous because I feel like we have so much to talk about.
Yeah.
Because we've been on, quite a journey over the past 18 months since we've known each other, and I feel like, there's loads to unpack. So,
Which is nice, because that was one of the reasons we started working together, why I came to you in a way. Because I had so many different directions in which I could have gone, and you helped me get some clarity on the way I wanted to think about and talk about myself. So it's a similar kind of vibe there. There's so much that we could talk about. How do we want to channel that into something specific, maybe, or not? Maybe we want to let it roam a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah, well, let's just let the river flow. And that's kind of one of the things you taught me about, just letting things just flow naturally. Because you are a flow coach.
Like, I've never called myself that, but I think you might have come up with the term, mental fitness flow, maybe just shorten it to flow.
Yeah, something in there. One of the main topics that I wanted to bring in with was that one of the core themes that you have around your work is loving yourself, and that being one of the core messages that you have. And another theme I want to bring into, because I feel that's how our two worlds relate, is the whole thing of squeezing your juice out, which is linked to my work and how squeezing out your authentic juice. I'd love to begin with just by hearing about you and what you do for people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so firstly, just to say, this idea of loving yourself still feels awkward to me to even talk about. It's something I really struggled to do for a long time, and I didn't know that for me that's what is at the heart of so much what holds us back and keeps us small. And it links really nicely to the squeezing the juice analogy there, because what are we squeezing? What is the juice? How are we opening that up? How are we offering ourselves to the world? And that juice for me always comes back to, what is our relationship with ourselves? And I do this work because I've historically not had a good relationship with myself. Hadn't liked myself for a really long time. I didn't know what that would feel like. And it's just been a process for me of getting underneath all the layers of the chaotic, bizarre inner workings of my mind and all the judgment and all the criticism, and finding a place where I could not necessarily artificially generate and create love, but just see what remained when all the other voices kind of left and got quiet, and I got beneath the chatter. And there was just stillness and love. And it feels almost still uncomfortable to even talk about that, but it feels like almost, basically everyone I speak to, at the heart of it, what would be of help is just being a little bit kinder to themselves, treating themselves the way that they do their best mates, offering that to themselves, and how much more enjoyable and easy and fulfilling life can be when we're able to do that for ourselves.
Yeah, and something I want to come into there is, and it's that whole shift from not loving yourself for a long time to then making that shift. And what were some of those like tangible pieces for you that helped you make that shift?
Yeah, good question. So I think back to my story as to how I got to where I am now, and I can pick up that story at various points. One of those points is my first time I ever sat on a cushion to meditate. So my journey as a teacher and a coach, really the foundation of that is in meditation and mindfulness. But the first time I ever meditated was living in East London. A friend told me about a local meditation center, and I didn't know anything about it. And this, by the way, isn't me advocating meditation at all. This was just my experience of it, and it led me here. A friend recommended I just go along and try it out, and I'm still not sure the extent to which he thought, someone needs some of this would be helpful, or he just mentioned it as a casual remark. But I went to this class, sat down on a cushion, beautiful room, lights were down closed, maybe 40 other people on cushions around me with a teacher. And within about 30 seconds, I was both incredibly bored and incredibly frustrated. This was not one of those experiences whereby someone sits down and they're like, I found myself and this is beautiful and I love myself, this is amazing. It was the opposite. And I kind of opened up my eyes after 2 minutes. I was looking around and I was thinking, everyone looks so blissful, happy and calm. That is not the case for me. And at the time I thought everyone else has got this sorted and sussed out and the problems with me. And later, now teaching this for many years, I realized actually that's a lot of what was going on for me was probably happening for a lot of other people in that room as well. But of course, we only really have access to the external presentation of emotion and experience rather than the deeper inner mind. So I got up from there, forgot about it, left that experience, never went back, thought I would never go back. And then another friend said, so I just went on this meditation retreat thing, you should give it a go. And so I went, and I don't know why I went. I guess I'm a relatively curious person. I didn't really know what I was in for. 10 days of what they call noble silence, which means silence of speaking, but it's also of any real acknowledgement of anyone else there, of even eye contact, of holding open the door for someone. There's no reading, there's no journaling. You are really there by yourself. And it was a really difficult experience. 10 days sitting on a cushion for about 10 and a half hours a day. And I just came away from that thinking, or realizing, I don't know myself at all. My mind is a crazy, chaotic place and it's uncomfortable. And there's something there. And I didn't know what I wanted it to become, but that was just the starting point of that. So I think, in answer to your question, the journey began simply by noticing the chaotic, contradictory, quite critical nature of my mind. And then as I got more into that world, I realized actually that's pretty common. And in many ways, because our brains are geared for survival, right, rather than happiness, this is a really common experience. A lot of people have a pretty harsh narrative inner critic. And so that first step of this awareness, oh wow, this is kind of driving my feelings and my behavior in the background. That was the first point in just noticing, okay, I need to pay attention to this.
And then rooting it all the way back to you saying you're a bit bored.
Oh yeah.
Because I feel like that has a real strong thread to then what you are doing now.
Yeah.
In terms of the offering that you bring into the world, because you've got such a tactile way of doing mindfulness, and it's very hands-on, and it's I've been fortunate enough to go through the mental fitness program with you. I signed up to the 6-week program that you offer, and it's very it feels like being in the gym. And the way that you train the mind is just as I've been working with a personal trainer, and that's the way that you frame it as well. As you're working with a mental fitness coach, as a personal trainer.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear how you, just from that insight of being bored to then creating your mental fitness coaching program. How did that become about? How did you create that?
Yeah, nice. I'm glad you asked about boredom. I find it one of the most interesting of all human experiences and emotions, because that's where it started for me, that boredom and that frustration, sitting there meditating for the first time. Actually, it was more than frustration, it was anger. I was actually angry at myself and everyone else in the room. But the boredom thing is, I feel like so much, there's a quote, Blaise Pascal, I think, that's something along the lines of, all of humanity's problems comes from, he says, man's inability to sit alone in a room by themselves, something like that. And I think it's so true. Just the challenge of being alone by yourself without distraction is fascinating. And so a lot of the time when I teach and I coach and we go through some kind of maybe a meditation experience together, and I ask, what was that experience like? What happened? Let's explore it. Let's open it up. Boredom is quite common, particularly in one of the first weeks or the first practices. So bringing curiosity to that experience of amazing. what does boredom feel like? What happens when you're bored? Where does your mind go? And how do you react when you notice that's where your mind's gone? That for me is such an interesting investigation, and it brings this quality of compassionate curiosity to an experience that we tend to automatically assume is negative. Or there's nothing else, like boredom, there's nothing else to explore here. So I think it's a really interesting point. And then how does it lead me to where I am with mental fitness? I think I was just in this kind of mindfulness meditation world for years, and really diligently reading lots of books, practicing, part of various communities. And I just knew that there was a level and something I wasn't accessing with myself. I experienced great profound benefit, but there was something that just wasn't quite connecting. I wasn't quite as aware and attuned and introspective as I thought was possible. And the models that I was using, quite a lot of the time it was quite theoretical. You know, I was still meditating as a practice, but the teachings are quite theoretical. And when I started to come across models around mental fitness and then started to create my own, it was just this real sense of tangibility, some specific steps, or at least a framework. Everyone's different, and different practices work for different people in different ways, depending even day to day on their mood. And so until I started seeing my mind as a muscle that could be trained, and there are specific skills within that training that I can identify and be specific around what I want to train in different ways and how that benefits me. It wasn't until that moment that things really started to click. So yeah, it was about this idea of insight being really good, education and knowledge being great. And that's what a lot of, at least the world that I grew up in, really valorized and talked about. And you know, I went through an academic system and then university and master's program, and it was very much about brain knowledge. And then kind of getting through the end of that process and thinking, wow, like I've been really good at utilizing half of my brain. I'm relatively clever, maybe, but not that smart. There wasn't much wisdom. I didn't know a lot about the inner workings of my own brain. I didn't know how to deal with failure and stress, and there was no resilience. And I realized, wow, there's all this practical knowledge I haven't developed, and that requires skills-based learning. It requires me to actually practice something so that my brain learns it in a way that it's then available when I need it. So the analogy is with any skill. You want to learn how to play tennis, you can read about how to hit a good forehand, but then you have to actually go out there and actually hit a few forehands to develop that skill. And so for me, it's the same with our brains, to creating those neuron flows in our brains so that different thoughts and feelings and behaviors become more automatic when we need it. We've got to actually do practices that are experiential. Reading about it in a book, hearing about it on a podcast, it's great, it's insightful, it can spark motivation, it can really tweak things in our minds sometimes, but then unless we implement it, unless we take action, unless we repeatedly do something, we're telling our brain, this is something I care about, pay attention to this is the kind of person I want to be, the benefits otherwise tend to fade quite quickly, actually.
And I think, yeah, like that was amazing, just the way that you kind of shared that. And I think just like one insight when I pulled through from that is when you shared about, yeah, like you can learn the best forehand, you can learn the best move, but unless you actually practice it, like it's just something that you know, and it's just like just there in the library book in your mind. And I want to kind of bring in just our journey together, because yeah, I've been lucky enough to do the 6 weeks mental fitness training with you, which has been amazing, and to share a few insights from that. For me, like the way that you initially brought me into that was you did a workshop at the Barclays Eagle Labs, and you did the saboteur voices that we all have in our minds, and you ran a questionnaire, and basically that pulled out like what voice is the loudest in your mind. And then we went on this 6-week journey together where you then took the loudest voices to me and then turned them into a strength, because you've got this amazing model that you created yourself that's kind of come from years of practice, and kind of like you then articulated into this framework. And I felt that was really powerful, the way that you basically took something and basically turned it into a strength on the other side. And it was such a powerful 6-week program, and it was like, that was the insight from it as well. It's like you shared the theory in our one-to-one sessions each week, but then you also gave practical tools and tips on how to actually implement that. And yeah, like I guess, yeah, just if you've got anything to share on that, like the way, the framework that you've created.
So I think for me, like the underlying everything you just said, there is this principle that we're not trying to be anyone different from who we are. It's this understanding of there's some stuff going on within me that isn't helpful, and I want to do something about that. But it's not about therefore becoming a different or a better person. It's just taking away, like I mentioned before, taking away some of the layers. And we can talk about what those layers are and how they get there, and whether they're developmental and biological, or to the culture within which we're born, and the social structures and the public conversation. But there are other voices going on. And so for me, it's a lot of taking away the layers of those to find what Martha Beck, a coach, calls the essential self. It's identifying the social self, which are everyone else's stuff, and then just coming into who you actually are. And so it's this concept of the challenges. If you tell me what your greatest inner chatter challenges are, I can also quite quickly and easily tell you what your inner strengths are. So it's not about saying that there's this really mean, nasty part of me that I don't like and I want to get rid of. It's about saying, there's this stuff I find challenging, but I know that within that there's gold. There's this essential self within me. So we probably talked about in sessions, for me, I have this habit sometimes to be a little bit of a people pleaser, which can be really challenging. I don't always assert some boundaries that I should. I don't want to upset other people, and I kind of go along with the flow. And it means that my needs aren't always met, and that can build up some frustration and resentment within me. This isn't necessarily something I want to demonize and get rid of. If I can look within that and say, what's the beautiful characteristic within that? What's happening here? Well, it's nice actually, because it means that I can be quite flexible with people. It's nice because I'm just ultimately trying to be quite empathetic towards the needs of others. I care about other people. I want to make sure that the people I'm around feel seen and valued. And that's a really beautiful way of describing a process that is equally true as the negative framing of a people pleaser as well. So that's within me. Those intentions, those aspirations are there. It's just, how do I access them? I don't need to be a different person. I don't need to demonize the aspects of my personalities that aren't helpful. I can just say, okay, when I take away some of the unhelpful people-pleasing thoughts and behaviors, I'm left with all that golden goodness, which is right there. I just need to access it.
Yeah, and I want to link this back to, like how, because I think the way that you said there, like about accessing the gold, and it plays back into the portrait work that I did for you, and I want to bring that in at this point because there's a few threads I want to pull on here. It's like, because initially you reached out, and that started out by me creating a portrait of you, and that but then part of that as well was going into your story and really hearing your story. And I'd love to hear how that was for you. And then there's something I want to pull out, which is you going back into, when you initially shared your story, you talked about your traveling days, and you spoke about like being back to basics. And there's two threads there I'd love to pull on, is like how the portrait experience was for you, and also like that initial going back to basics and how that links into where you are today, the practical elements of what you do.
Nice. Well, firstly, mentioning portrait, we've got it right here. I feel like we need to take a little look. So do you want to introduce how this was maybe the first portrait? There we go, this is me. How beautiful is that? Aziz messaged me, you messaged me with the concept, and I think I responded almost immediately, I'm not sure, but I knew that I wanted to do it pretty immediately. The concept of using the same colours for everyone, that we all share that but that we express that in different ways. As soon as I heard that, I loved it. It resonated so deeply on like a profound level. I thought, and this is interesting because I've never thought of myself as a creative person. I'm starting to see myself more as a creative person. And I just thought that was such a beautiful creative expression of something that I believed so deeply. It's like this tangible, physical object that can be used to tell that and to represent that and to show people. So that was so nice. And it maybe in some ways, I haven't thought of this before, it links to the kind of work that I do as well, like getting back to basics. It is something that can be, the way you communicated what this was to me and the way that I think about it is so simple, but it's deep and it's profound. And I think that's what I'm trying to do through my work. There are so many teachings out there around well-being and performance and different models and frameworks. And I just had to take a long time to just think about what is a streamlined, integrated, holistic version of this that I can create, that I can give people in a similar way, to say, you're going to use this in a unique way that makes most sense to you, but this is the framework of how our minds work. We have similar brains, we all have the same brain going around, but they work in different ways. We're each unique, but let's really have something tangible where you can see, it's mental fitness flow, it's a flow chart that I have, it's very specific skills and muscles that people build and strengthen and develop. And so for me, it's really important. Simplicity and minimalism is really important. And yeah, maybe that comes from, I've done quite a lot of traveling, a lot of which was quite, back to basics and minimal. A lot of it was just on a bike with a tent and a stove, away from a lot of mainstream civilization for a long time. I just felt like that is something that naturally resonates with me. I love that. Spent a couple of years living in a van. I'm not really sure why, other than just like some form of simpler living. And I think getting back to that basics of what's really happening here, what's important is important. But also for me, that's what leads to real significant change. When there are all these different competing models, they tend to overlap, they often contradict. Different experts say different things about how we can optimize and improve our happiness, which is all great, but how do they relate to each other? How do these concepts work together? And I think it goes back as a theme throughout my life. One of the subjects I studied at university was philosophy, and there are these great big ideas, and how do we make sense of it? How do we make sense of what's happening here? What's the framework? How can we bring it all together so we can communicate it more easily and understand it more deeply?
And I think like moving forward, like thinking bigger picture wise, like, because I feel like this is where both of our worlds are like kind of quite linked, and I think we really resonate. When we're moving towards a similar purpose, but we have two very different ways of doing it, and I feel like our two worlds really complement each other. Like with your mental fitness framework, it really gives me the mechanics to basically see my mind as a muscle, and that's been a really valuable skill that I've learned through the coaching with you, and I feel with the portraits, that being a creative outlet that kind of turns into something tangible. It's like there's two different sides of the brain. It's it's almost like I'm on the left side, and that's the right side, and the two together combine to move towards this greater vision. And I think, I don't know if that is that kind of feel.
Definitely. I talk about what I do as a whole brain approach all the time, and depending again, kind of maybe what culture that you're born into, they tend to emphasize one half or the other. So there's the more creative, expressive side, or there's the more logical, rational side, and it's how can we balance these? How can we bring both of them to the process? How can we allow ourselves to dream big, to think broadly, to be open to experience? And then how can we take that and we say, okay, how do we now channel that into something specific and create an action plan and deliver on that step by step? So I think they work in tandem. But what I had always been doing before I understood this whole brain approach, I'd been evaluating my ideas and my thoughts before I'd really given them full rein to express themselves. So I was just shutting down that creative potential because I would see the potential problem with it before I really developed it further. So I think you're absolutely right. That's something that I had to learn to just, in fact, one of the practices that helped me do that, to just lean into that is like a mind dump journaling. Maybe take a journal prompt, maybe not, but just let myself write without this perfectionist tendency that there is going to be a succinct, concise answer to a specific problem. How can I just let the pen continue to flow across the page, even if what I'm writing doesn't make much sense and it's complete nonsense at the moment and I'm just waiting for the next idea to emerge? Can I just give myself that freedom and that opportunity to just let the mind flow and see what emerges?
Yeah, and I really like that because it's kind of like it's like a mirroring thing going on here because because it was like the 6 weeks side by side. It's like I did the mental fitness program with you, and then you did the 6-week book with me, and it was like that in reverse. It was like for me, I was kind of coming to you like with that flow, and you were kind of helping to package it up and like kind of helping me like make sense of things, and it was almost like I was flowing to you, and you were basically compartmentalizing it. And then in reverse, like how was that for you? Like you coming to you, or you coming to me with the book? Like how did the book like play into that model for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Similar roles in each other's lives, definitely. So for me, the book was. So firstly, just to say, I think fundamentally what the two of us do is quite similar in the sense of we create a space which is hopefully quite comfortable and driven by curiosity and compassion, where the other person, there's trust in the dynamic. And we allow that person to just explore their experience and their story. And we do it in different ways, but I think fundamentally it's a similar kind of role that we're playing for other people. So when we did that together for the book that you created for me, just you being there as someone who I trusted and liked, and I felt no judgment. It's quite rare, even sometimes, our best friends, we love them, but sometimes they jump in with a judgment or some advice or trying to shape things in a different kind of way. To have that space where someone's just eager and bright-eyed and is just curious at asking deeper questions is transformative, just in itself. And you helped both build out my narrative, and you allowed me to just explore all these different areas, but you would bring me back to some central themes that you were identifying along the way. And it was great. For me, it was, oh, yeah, you're right. That is actually within everything I just talked about in the last 20 minutes. Yeah, that is the little nugget of gold that I want to emphasize and lean into. And then we continued that process and it became a book. And then taking everything that I had said into these snapshots of distilled ramblings from me, distilled that into something specific alongside visuals and some principles, allows me to, maybe it's similar to if you're giving a talk, instead of having the whole script there and you're trying to stick to it perfectly, and as a result it kind of ends up maybe winding around the place, end up saying too much and you lose that natural flow. That book is that story that you can tell that connects the dots and then allows you to speak with clarity to other people, and they can imagine it and they can come on the journey with you. So yeah, landing with that book at the end, with the portrait at the beginning as well, which just is the perfect launch point for that. Yeah, brings that clarity for me, but there's also something around, we talk about flow, there's an ease and there's a flow to how I'm able to now present who I am and what I do, because it's there. It's something tangible as well. I can look back on at any point and pick up my story at any point, and my offerings, and who I feel like I am, and what I do with people. It's all there, distilled in one little package. So
yeah,
really helpful.
and to play that back, like, because I guess like what kind of feeds that is a real sort of like heartache for me, like when I meet someone like you and got like this amazing like product that you've created in your mind, and it's like you've got so much passion to like enlighten the world with this, like with this flow model or this specific thing that you've created just from your life experience. But the challenge is that people can't see it, and you can kind of, you can share and you can talk, but then until you can actually like pick it up and feel it, like it's hard for someone to actually grasp it. And that's the real sort of like a pain point that I'm trying to really soothe by creating these books. And I think like linking it back to like work, because I've been working in design for the past 10 years, and this is my like version of, let's say, like brand storytelling, but I've done it in a way where it's like more a children's comic book, but for an adult. And it's that way of really sort of like taking a complex idea or a complex model and really sort of like creating it into this simplified format, so then anyone can understand it, and more so you can see it yourself, and it's like it's easy for you to just come back to and be like, oh, this is it. And just having that one symbol in this really clearly articulated way of just being like, this is it. If you want to talk to someone, saying this is what I do, and it's clearly coming out of you. Because I feel like the way that you talk about what you do, and just the way that you've spoken today about like your philosophy and your insights and your journey, it's vast. And I feel like sometimes when you have such a vast like amount of insights to share, like it can almost like be quite overwhelming for someone to receive. And it's like having something that can kind of like thread all that together and have like, well, here's like this book that kind of explains it in a few pages, is like the dream. And that's kind of like with the portrait as well. It's like there's like the way I kind of see the portraits is like we're all made from the same 6 colours, and they all kind of like, these 6 colours are flowing around, and then they all kind of like come together for this single moment, and that's kind of like framed into you, and then they'll disperse again, and then they'll come back together and form the next portrait. And it's that whole thing of like just coming back together, and it's like the same with the book. It's like an anchor point of like just coming back together. So like if you're having like a bad day or things are not going to plan, then you've got this centre point to be like, cool, I'm going through a bit of a storm right now, but then I've got this centre point that really kind of holds me together, and I can kind of like go through this storm, let it be withered, and then I can come through it. But I know my soul, you know, I've got this soul kind of like kept for you, and that's kind of like what the book is really. And yeah,
100%. Yeah, and I think a lot of people who do the kind of work that I do, or people who are self-employed, who run their own businesses, need someone like you, because we're often interested in so many different things. There are so many different options and ways of doing things. Having someone like you come along and say, okay, how do we channel this? So we were talking about before the difficult, unhelpful parts of our personalities and how that can actually be the strength. You know, I have a perfectionist tendency. I want everything to be perfect before anyone else sees it. And that leads to me putting things out more slowly than I would otherwise like. I've got all these different ideas, how do I channel it? And so you're able to come along and take something that's within me and externalize it and actually give it as an offering. But also just to say something about you, the reason that for me, of why I wanted to work with you and why I've loved working with you, is it is about the products and what we've created together, but it's all that is possible because of what we talked about at the very beginning of this conversation, how we started about love. I think you come from a place of love, and I think other people see that and feel that, they know that, and that's why there's that space of trust and comfort in the conversations that you have with people, whether here or in the process to create portrait or the book. That is the foundation, and that is something I feel every time we meet and every time we work together. There is good, yeah, I feel it strongly, and I know other people feel it too, because I hear the way other people talk about you, and I think that is, it's the relationship with ourselves that is a spark for everything. And even though we'll always have challenges in the way in which we relate to ourselves, we'll always have low moments and challenging times, and we'll start to question ourselves. I think underneath all of that, knowing that the self-critical voices are just that, they're just voices, we don't have to believe them. As I say to you all the time, like thoughts are theories, Emotions are feedback, actions are experiments. If we always remember that, I hope it feels like you know in your heart your value and you have that love for yourself, even if sometimes other thoughts and emotions get in the way that challenge that or question that. I think beneath all of that, the foundation is love.
Yeah, like, thank you. That was very touching to hear that. And I want to share something back to you as well, like not just to kind of like say the exact same thing, but like in words to effect, because that was one thing I wanted to like touch on was, yeah, like besides the product, like the reason why I've come to you is the energy that you have for what you do, and it's like, yeah, like effectively, I'm paying to spend time with you. Yeah. Like in a way, like, but that kind of sounds weird, but like because it's that whole thing of like, where am I choosing to put my energy? And money is an energy source, and it's like you put energy towards the things that kind of like you want to like like be around and closer to and like learn from and to give back to, and you know there's like a real source there. And I think like the way that you like are, the way that you project out what you're doing, there's a real sort of like vibrancy, and there's a real sort of like with the mental fitness model, like again, like it's just a model, you know, like a sofa or a chair. It's just an object. It's model as an object, but the person who actually is using that model or like driving that model is the energy. You know, that's the energy that I'm drawn towards. Like the same person could have the model that you do, like, but then it'll be completely different.
Sure.
And it's like there's like 10 different Ferraris, all the same model, but there's 10 different drivers. Yeah. Like who are you getting the passenger seat with?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like the same with like, I guess with the work I do as well. It's like, but it's the whole point there is, and something I want to come to is, yeah, like what is the bigger vision here? Like, what are you moving towards? Like, what's your dream for the world? Like, coming out of yourself, like the people you've been working with so far, like what is your grander vision for what you do?
Yeah. Thank you for all of the things you said. Grander vision, you know what, like there is a vision, but it's quite loosely held. It's quite broad, intentionally so, because I want to hold space for the ways in which it might express itself. But it again comes back to how we started the conversation. Love. The other one that I would add to that is the sense of purpose and meaning, our why. So I think that there are these two strands. What impact do I want to have in the world? I want to help people love themselves a little bit more, to treat themselves like they would their best mate. And I think all of us have this deeper inner craving underneath it all to have a sense of our why, to have a sense of what am I here to do? How can I make life feel meaningful as I pass through it? You know, life being a series of moments, one after the other. How can I make this collection of moments be intentional? And so by the end of it, I feel like that was a life well lived. And so I think it's those two things, and they come together, purpose and love. So I think if I can just in my own little way spread some of that in the world, then I'll be really happy. And I have all kinds of ideas about how that might express itself, and you know, retreats in the future and different ways in which I might want to coach people and experiences I want to create, courses, future courses I want to do. But yeah, underneath it all, it's those two things, like self-love in particular, and then kind of a sense of like, what's my why?
That's super cool, man. Yeah.
How about you?
How about me? Like, because again, like our worlds are very similar in terms of like we've got really similar values, and for me, it's like I always bring it back to the whole thing of squeezing out your juice, and like just like this guy for Tao,
I love that.
Like, keep squeezing out. Because for me, like for a long time, like I held a lot of shame about myself as well. I mean, you didn't directly say that, but like like I held a lot of shame about myself, and I found it really struggled to express like what I've got to say and let out like who I am. And I feel like I'm comfortable doing that, like doing the podcast and like just working and being friends with people like you, and who are also on a similar journey, but also kind of just outside of work, like we just like have similar interests and things that we talk about. So it's I guess my bigger why, or like my bigger purpose, is helping people to express their imagination. And for me, like, I feel like there's so much in our minds that is untapped. And like for me, like as a kid, I used to love like cartoons and drawing and illustrations, and yeah, there's this whole thing of, and I spoke about it on the last episode, where yeah, as a kid, my mum used to like always like feed me different like books, and like she used to take me to Disney World and went to Mr. Blobbyland and all these amazing places, but these worlds were just created from imagination. And it's this whole thing of, within our minds, we've got the ability to just go into these new places, and from that we can create whole new worlds and whole new characters. And for me, the dream is to tell stories, you know, tell stories of people, like bring out the stories that need to be heard, that haven't been heard before. So, for example, like within you, there's all these microscopic stories that could then become like a children's book, or or could become this like animated comic, you know. So it's that whole thing of bringing stories to life. And I feel like I'm living that purpose by like, for example, creating a book for you, and the other ones that I'm doing for other people. It's that whole people of helping people to just realise their own story, and being able to be a character within their own story, to then kind of like to actually feel like they're living a game, you know, like they're in the game of their own life. And by me doing that for other people, I'm kind of living the game of life that I'm kind of here to do, which is helping people to characterize themselves by turning people into these characters that live their own life. So I guess coming back to it, it's like I think I'm born to just tell stories and help people to realize the characters that they are. And just by doing that, I think it just kind of washes away some of the structures that we're kind of born into. Like we feel like we have to like do these jobs, we have to live a certain way, we have to walk this certain path. But my whole purpose is to help people realise that you don't have to, and you can walk your own path, and you're in this game already. Like, what path do you want to walk on? You can get off that path and walk that way.
How did you realise that like life is, we can view life as a game, and there are maybe have-tos that were being imposed upon you that you didn't actually have to?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and I think there's probably not just one way that I did realise it, but I think there's one realisation is just the whole thing of like working as soon as I left uni, and working 9 till 5, Monday to Friday, and then going out on a Friday night, and then doing the same the week after, and then doing the same the week after, then being on this cycle, and then feeling like, hang on a minute, where's all this going? And you just felt like I'm in this washing machine. I was just going on a circle that was going to go round and round and round, but it wasn't going like this. Like I think like up until a point of me working in a company, like I felt like I was going on a path like this. But then as soon as I started working post uni, I felt like I was just in the same. I was just in the windmill. I was just in the turnstile like this. So then for me, then kind of like breaking away from that and moving to Canada by myself with a rucksack, for the first time I felt like, wow, like literally I'm just here, and it felt like I'm just being dropped into this game, and it's like, okay, cool, like it's now on to me to like make the next move. And it kind of felt like I was in this like computer game where I was just like, okay, cool, like where do I go now? And I was just basically like looking at my backpack and what's in my backpack, there's energy in there, get that out. So kind of felt like in like Super Mario kind of vibes. And then going to the next place, and then so at that point I'm in this game. But the problem is, and I think that this is very similar to your story, in in the sense of when you were on your bike camping, like going from place to place in your travelling days. It's like it's very similar to me, like in my Canadian days, where like I'm on this path, but then the majority of people are not. And then it's like, well, I've kind of realised that you don't need to live in the way that you're supposed to live. You can have an alternative life. And I think like now, like that was 8 years ago, so kind of life's 9 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago. And I've now kind of like met a community, like the Happy Starter School, like people like yourself, like other communities where people have got that knowing. But up until recently, like they didn't have those people around me. But I think like now that I kind of realised myself that you don't have to be on this like well-trodden path, and like you are actually in charge of your own destiny, then it's kind of given me this knowing to be like, well, if I know it and I've been able to make a life from it, then I want to help other people to realise that you kind of let go of like the system. And I think I'm gonna like tracking all the way back to even my mum, like the way that she's carved her life, and then my grandma, the way that she carved her life. Both of them like massive role models for me, because they didn't walk the traditional path. Like in both of their like journeys, they cut away from the system in order to like create new life. And then I kind of did that by going to Canada as my first step, but also before that as well, going to uni first with my family, to move away for uni, like all these like first steps. But it's kind of again like that whole thing of like breaking away from what is, you know. And then I think like something like, and I guess this is what like really drew me to you, like on a deeper level, is because there's a foundational level to like what you do. Like you're kind of going into people's minds and really kind of like taking a former model, removing that, and then putting a new model inside, and basically helping people to navigate through that. And like for example, when we worked together with the saboteurs,
yeah.
I'm really bad at saying that word, but like again, which is that saboteur voice right there. It's like you basically like we put a scenario in, attached it to a certain voice. Like for me, a stickler was a big voice, which is the perfectionist, and then the pleaser was the cocktail or the mixer to go along with that. So the mixer plus the pleaser plus the stickler were my two voices. But then you take a scenario, you drop it into where that fits within your model, and then I'd be going down a certain pathway, but then you direct it and go down a different pathway. And it's like, it was just that it's like you put a new headset on, and then it's giving me a new lens to like see life through. But kind of again, it goes back to that foundational level. Is like, what's the headset you're wearing that you can navigate these thoughts around? And I'm seeing these thoughts like lemmings, and then you're kind of like putting them down these different pathways.
Yeah, that's great. Well, just to say this, the saboteurs that you mentioned there, that's a part of the framework which comes from Positive Intelligence, which is a mental fitness training program. And I think giving them names like that allows us to take a step back and say, that's not actually who I am. I'm kind of the observer of that. It's not actually who I am. And what I felt within you as you spoke, a word popped up as you were talking about your story and making these decisions where you notice you don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. The word that came up was just freedom. You felt free. I just noticed choice. It's ability to choose. Makes me think of, there's a quote, something that Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Zen Buddhist monk, said that I love. Something along the lines of, there are more possibilities in each moment than we realize. And for me, in some ways, all of it just comes back to that. It's about that freedom and that choice to notice what's really happening right now, like what's actually happening. Because our minds are kind of prediction-based machines. We tend to see the world according to assumptions and bias. So in this moment, what possibilities are genuinely available to me? What different ways of thinking and feeling and acting are there? And I feel like that kind of ran through your story there, as the ability to just notice something in the moment. Who do I want to be? And sometimes, yeah, like I came to you because I needed an external voice to shine that light on the story I was telling myself, my inability to kind of hone in the story and the message. And it's a similar thing, you know, sometimes in my conversations with clients, it's creating that space where we can share and spend time together. And it's just questioning the assumptions and the belief patterns beneath it. Someone will say something and I'll say, are you sure? What if we were to apply a maybe to that assumption? Just saying to someone, is that actually true, what you just said there? That person at work is behaving in this way because they are motivated by this particular, you know, it's just maybe. I don't know, can we be sure? So there's also something there around humility. We don't know as much as we like to think.
Yeah.
Can we take a step back and just say, actually, again, Martha Beck has this story where she says, this line where she says, the only thing that we know we can say for certain is that we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. So it's that humility to say, these assumptions that I'm making about myself as well, about what I'm capable of or not, and other people, and the way situations are going to inevitably turn out, can we just be humble enough to say, yeah, I don't actually know.
Well, so something's coming through me now, like, and yeah, like we can decide if we want to go down here, but like it's this whole feeling of psychedelics is what was coming through me, and like, yeah, like not to go too far into it, but like where I want you to come into was like, because again, like what was coming through was with the portraits, for example, I kind of see that as a psychedelic trip. Like it's kind of almost like just like taking something and just exploding it and being like how it kind of comes back together.
Yeah.
And then like when you go on a trip, like the word literally a trip, you're going from you starting somewhere and then ending up somewhere else, and or like a journey, a psychedelic journey or a journey, you're going from A to B, and it's like there's something that like, and then taking that as 2 points in the journey. So like step one is basically like explosion and the birth point, and then it's kind of the journey of putting those pieces back together. And something that you do within your model, and you say it's like asking the question at each point in that journey. So then you're making the decision of, cool, like I don't know what to do here, or like, okay, is that the right choice? And there's like, you really slow things down in a way where you're adding grit to that journey, putting things back together, the integration journey. And yeah, like I think the point I'm making there is sometimes when you take a substance, it can almost like it can sometimes bypass that work. So you're going from A to B without having to do the work. But then through your model, you're actually making people do that work. And it kind of like brings back to that mental fitness model being very similar to a personal trainer. You're actually training the mind to become stronger. So then once you finish through this coaching program, you're actually like stronger, and you haven't just gone on this journey where you haven't actually strengthened anything. You've actually strengthened this muscle that you have. And I think that's a real uniqueness to your offering, is that you actually like building that resilience in people, and really sort of like linking it back to, okay, cool, like where is it that I want to go here? Like, what is it that I know? What is it that I don't know? And you kind of, there's real strength and grit that you're building on that journey.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that journey from what I call, it's the theme of the first session, but in a way it's the theme of the whole course, is from autopilot to awareness. And creating that awareness is those checkpoints that you mentioned. And without those checkpoints, without that awareness, it's that sense of looking back at the last 40 years of life and just thinking, wow, those went by and I'm not sure how much that was what I really wanted to be doing with my time. And that crisis point can come. But yeah, you're right. Like bringing it back to the like mental fitness muscles. You know, we talk about it on the course, don't we? Like awareness, attention, attitude, action. So can we be aware of the possibilities in each moment? Can we bring our attention back away from the mental chatter that kind of tends to get in our way? Can we bring attitudes that are helpful? We mentioned curiosity and compassion are two of those, the skills, the qualities of character, and then action. For me, action is so important. I think a lot of the time I looked at models that were theoretical or only dealt with the inner world. I think it's really important at the end there to also say, how do we implement this? Yeah, so it's these 4 A's, awareness, action, and attitude.
And to link it back to what I said about psychedelics, it wasn't to say, it wasn't kind of like saying this or that. It was more just kind of like as an alternative, because something that we both do with each other is like there's space there, so that allows for creativity, and it's like that holding of, okay, bring in all the energy, like bring in all that you've got, and then it's not, there's no judgmental voices in there. It's very much, it's like, okay, cool, you're coming to me with the energy, bring in what you want to bring in, and then let's carve that together. So it's this whole thing of, I feel like that's kind of comes back to those 2 pieces of of our messaging of like loving yourself and squeezing out your juice. So it's like, it's that whole thing of, just allowing and giving permission to be you, but there needs to be an element of, you need to really trust that this person is giving you the space, and it's like an opening, but then when it's open, there's like vulnerability there, so you require someone to hold you in a way where they're just, it's like a channel, isn't it? Like when a river starts to flow, like in order to become a river, it needs to start with a trickle, then it's just water, but then it needs an element of banks there to hold it, and then the banks then kind of widen, and then before you know it, okay, cool, it's out into the ocean. But in order to have that like vastness, you need that initial holding to begin with. But it needs to be done delicately, so it doesn't go like that. And it's kind of more just like, I'm just holding the banks, so the person who's on the journey is guiding it, I'm just holding it until it's able to walk. And it goes into, growing into fatherhood. And becoming a parent, and nurturing, and letting these children, and I talk about my creative, like bringing creation into the world, and then you been talking about the actual thought of bringing a baby into the world, and I'm thinking like, I'd love to do that as well, and become a father one day. And it's like, just let those babies become living beings.
I love that. And these banks, I think about, what are those banks made of in a relationship like that? Something you said there, trust. I mentioned it earlier, you said it again, trust. I think it's presence and trust are 2 of the core foundational attitudes there. And one of the ways that I think we build trust, or I try to build trust, and the reason actually that I really struggled to find much benefit through going to therapy myself over the years, I think there was a lack of trust. And the reason I think for me there was a lack of trust is because the person I was sitting across from, the therapist, they didn't give much of themselves. I didn't know much about who they were. And for me, that's important. A relationship, to some extent, needs to feel balanced. Obviously, in that relationship, there is an imbalance. They are the professional, the therapist, helping me explore my experience. But they were a bit of a blank canvas. And it kind of felt like I was being very open and vulnerable, and they weren't reciprocating. And I think it took me a really long time in life to realize that if I want deep relationships, I need to be deep myself. It can't be one-sided. I find it much easier, as many of us do, to ask the vulnerable questions rather than be vulnerable. So what I try to do, and I think what you do really well, and why I think we've enjoyed working together so well, is that you show up as a real, complicated, full human to your work, and you don't shy away from that, and you're willing to be with that. When you arrived this morning, we talked about how we were feeling. You were honest. You talked about this. We're recording this together. but you gave me a real sense of like where you were at this morning. And I try to do the same in my sessions. I talk about how I'm doing, what I'm going through. I'm obviously not perfect, and I'm really happy to talk about my imperfections and the ways in which I'm working with that and the challenges that I go through, because I think that's how we learn. That's how we learn from each other and from ourselves, by verbalizing, expressing the challenges that are within us. And that's a gift. That's a real gift, I think, that we can offer to each other, to say, actually, this is really what's happening for me right now. This is how I'm trying to work through it. Or maybe actually I'm just stuck and I'm not sure. And maybe even asking that question, do you have any ideas? Any thoughts? Because I'm not really sure. And I think us being open and vulnerable with clients or with friends, with family, is a real gift, because it gives others permission to do the same.
So yeah, that's amazing, man. I think you really touched on something there, like I haven't really thought of. Well, I've thought of before, but not been able to articulate like this. But I'm not articulating it yet. But it's the whole thing of, yeah, like I've always had this thought that the therapists are like the richest people in the world, because they get to experience, and it's like actually a Bob Dylan quote that where he goes, therapists are the ones that should be paying the clients because the clients are giving them so much like richness.
Yeah.
And it kind of just like leaning into that a bit more. It's like, yeah, like, because effectively something that we're both doing in each of our works is like, we want the customer on the receiving end to actually go out into the world and to express their fullness. And it's like that is, in order to do that, there needs to be an element of, yeah, you can be your full self here because you're actually out in the world in this container that we've created together, and you are actually being yourself within this container. So when this container's not here anymore, you're out in the world anyway. So, and I think that's something I've kind of learned from my own therapy journey is, yeah, like in the therapy room, like I did in my first round of therapy, I did about 30 sessions. And it was like literally going to a therapist's office and being in there, and then when I'm out, it's like, okay, cool, I'm out in the outside world, but then I was inside and outside, and there was a separation. And I think, like similar to you, like I didn't know much about my therapist, because it's very much me giving to them, and then them not saying much back in return. So there was no like reciprocal relationship.
Yeah.
And I think like, yeah, that's something that is really important. Is like, it's like this. It's like coming in like feeling small and leaving feeling like, yeah, I'm out.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we both do in our work.
Yeah. Maybe the only thing I'd add to that is what you said made me think of the relationship I have with my supervisor, my mentor, my therapist. He doesn't pretend to have all the answers. We explore together. And I think me learning from him to be able to implement that with my clients and my friends as well, to say, I'm not the guru with the answers and I need to teach it to you. There's a model that we use to explore, and we can be curious together. That for me also takes a lot of pressure off myself, which allows me to be fully present and vulnerable. So I'm not up there as I don't see myself per se as a teacher. It's almost like a guide and an explorer and a co-explorer. And I think that is also a nice little dynamic shift as well, which is different to the relationship I had with my therapist before. Which I think is just helpful to highlight. I think that's the place that I tried to come from. It's, I'm imperfect too, I'm learning all the time. I hopefully have some skills and some tools which can be of benefit to you. Let's create a space and let's go on the journey together.
Yeah, wow. Coming into the seal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah, wow. I think this has been an amazing journey we've just been on together. I think yeah, like when I came in this morning, I was super nervous, like you alluded to before, like about asking how I was, because I just felt like between us, like over the past 18 months, we've been on such a vast journey together since meeting each other, and to where we are today. And I just wanted to like cover as much of that as we possibly could.
Yeah.
And yeah, like if there was one message you'd like to share, what's one thing you'd like to share?
I think I'll just go with the consistent, repeated line here around where we started with loving ourselves. It's an easy thing to say, it's a difficult thing to do, but I think catching yourself, becoming skilled at catching yourself each time you've generated a negative, self-critical thought, and taking a moment and just noticing that that's happened, that is exercising that muscle of awareness. And I think that is the foundation and the most helpful starting point and the launch pad for all of this stuff. Noticing when a thought pops up that is negative or critical, and just remembering that that's just a theory. May or not may be true, who knows? But at least taking a moment to step back and just realizing it's there and letting it pass. When we are able to do that repeatedly, and to know that the mind is just a chatterbox and a rumor mill that does not, and often does not, tell the truth. It is trying to keep us safe through causing and creating judgments of ourselves and others. We discover possibility and freedom. So I think it's that awareness of the chatter of the mind, getting really good at starting to notice that, flexing that awareness muscle. That's the thing I'd encourage anyone to go out there and start trying to implement.
Amazing stuff.
How about you?
How about me? I think if I had to leave one message, is allow yourself to create one thing, and if you just spent 1 minute per day just creating something, and do that for 100 days, then you would have created a thing. And yeah, put it into a box, like just be like, get a piece of paper and just sketch something, give yourself a minute, and then do that for 100 days, and then after 100 days you've got 100 sketches, and all those sketches might just be like, for you, a little scrapbook, or you might look at them and be like, oh yeah, I've just made like this whole new character world. And I think just that whole thing of allowing yourself to create just is how you make new life. So just create, because we're born to create. And we're pro creators. So be professional creators, really, is my message.
Love that.
Yeah, amazing stuff.
Cool, man.
Cool.
Buddy. Oh, thank you for the conversation.
Thank you for being you.
Nice, man. Oh, thank you for being you.
All right, peace out, everyone, and yeah, see you soon.
Nice.